It was a Sunday evening in late October, and the house smelled faintly of cinnamon candles because Mom had lit them in the kitchen, trying to make the place cozy as the nights turned cold. I was visiting for the weekend, sitting on the edge of the couch with a cup of lukewarm tea, scrolling through work emails. That was when it happened, the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about my own family. Mom had stepped outside to water the plants on the porch, leaving her phone on the coffee table. A new message notification popped up, and the screen lit with a faint glow. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't even curious, but when the phone buzzed again, it automatically played a voice memo through the speaker. I froze as I heard my brother's voice echo through the quiet living room. Daniel's tone was calm, rehearsed, almost silky. "Mom, you know Clara is unstable. She can't manage her own finances, let alone yours. If you let her near your accounts, everything will fall apart." My breath caught, and for a moment I thought I had misheard. But no, the words were clear, his voice undeniable. The teacup trembled in my hand, the liquid rippling like a seismograph of my heartbeat. Unstable. He called me unstable. The living room seemed to tilt shadows from the lamp, stretching across the carpet like grasping fingers. I set down the cup before it shattered in my grip, but my chest already felt like glass cracking under pressure. I had spent years building my career, keeping my life steady, paying every bill on time, working quietly as a staff accountant with no drama, no reckless spending. Yet here was my older brother, the so-called golden child, deliberately painting me as some fragile liability to the very woman who raised me. I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a prickling heat that made my ears ring. I wanted to storm out onto the porch, confront them both, scream that I was not broken, that I was not the child they could dismiss. But something stronger held me back, the instinct to listen, to collect, to let the truth reveal itself. Daniel kept talking, and each sentence landed like a hammer blow. "She forgets things, she overspends, she's emotional. I'm worried about her judgment, Mom. If you give her authority, she'll drain everything and regret it later." My throat closed. The gaslighting was almost clinical, as if he had prepared a list of accusations to slowly poison Mom's trust in me. And worse, I could hear my mother sigh on the other end, tired, hesitant. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend me. She let him go on. My vision blurred with angry tears that refused to fall, suspended like a storm cloud. The cruelty wasn't only in his words, but in the casual confidence, the entitlement that came from years of favoritism. Daniel had always been the star, the boy who got the best schools, the applause at family dinners, the hand on the shoulder from Dad. I had been the one standing in the corner, clapping for him. Now, at 32, after carving out my own path, I was still his target. And this time, he wasn't just stealing praise. He was after control of Mom's house, her savings, her trust. The twist pierced deeper when Daniel lowered his voice, almost conspiratorial. "Mom, if you sign over power of attorney to me, I can protect you from Clara's mistakes. She won't even have to know. I'll handle everything quietly." My knees went weak. Power of attorney. He wasn't just smearing my name. He was moving pieces on a chessboard I hadn't even known we were playing. The phone lay inches from me, still glowing, still broadcasting his betrayal. I clutched my hands into fists, nails digging crescents into my palms, forcing myself not to scream. At that moment, the door creaked and Mom came back inside, humming softly, wiping her hands on a towel. She didn't even notice her phone was still playing. I snatched my gaze away, heart thundering, pretending to sip my tea. But inside, something irrevocable had snapped. The room looked the same. Cinnamon candles, neat curtains framed family photos of smiling faces, but it felt entirely different now. This was no longer my childhood home. It was a stage for deceit, and I was no longer the overlooked daughter. I was the target of a calculated character assassination. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, Daniel's words replaying in my head, each repetition a dagger, unstable, irresponsible, emotional. Words meant to erase me from my own family. He didn't know I had heard every syllable. He didn't know that by trying to erase me, he had given me the one weapon he never expected: the truth of his own voice. And in that moment, beneath the ache and the humiliation, a spark of determination flared. If he wanted a war of evidence, I was ready to fight. I woke up the next morning with my eyes raw, the taste of bitterness thick on my tongue. The word unstable pulsed in my head like a cruel drumbeat. I went down to the kitchen where Mom was already making coffee, humming lightly, her hair pinned back the way she always did on Sundays. She smiled at me as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just sat through a conversation where her son had dismantled my character piece by piece. That smile hurt more than silence. I forced myself to sit at the table, watching her hands move with ease as she poured steaming coffee into chipped mugs. I wanted to ask, "Do you really believe him?" but the words stuck like glue to the back of my throat. Instead, I just sipped and let the bitterness scorch. Daniel arrived shortly after striding through the door with that familiar aura of self-assuredness. He kissed Mom on the cheek, clapped me on the shoulder like we were just siblings sharing a pleasant weekend. The hypocrisy made me nauseous. He looked at me, his eyes glinting with something smug, though his mouth curled into a polite grin. I wondered if he knew his secret memo had played aloud, if he had any idea I had heard every word. He carried on like nothing was wrong, chatting about work, about his new investment property, about how he had to help Mom call the insurance office later. Mom nodded approvingly at everything he said. I sat silent, my heart drumming so loud I thought it might burst through my ribs. As I drove back to my apartment later that afternoon, rain streaked the windshield in thin lines, the wipers thudding like metronomes. My mind refused to rest. I replayed every little moment from childhood that suddenly made sense, the times Daniel got extra allowance while I was told to save the way Dad boasted about his achievements at church, while mine were reduced to a passing mention the Christmas when he received a new bike and I got a hand-me-down coat. For years, I told myself it was nothing that I was overthinking, that siblings always had rivalries. But now it was clear it had been favoritism all along, a steady diet of inequality that had grown into Daniel's sense of entitlement. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the sky had darkened, the street lamps flickering on. I parked and sat in the car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart refusing to slow. The betrayal was bad enough, but the danger was worse. He wasn't just tarnishing my reputation. He was trying to gain full control over Mom's future, her house, her money. If he succeeded, I would be shut out, not just emotionally, but legally. He was moving fast and quiet, and if I did nothing, he would win before I even realized the rules. That realization hardened something inside me. The old me would have swallowed the humiliation, gone silent, tried to prove myself by simply existing better. But this was different. This was calculated theft dressed as concern, and I wasn't going to stand by. I whispered to myself in the empty car. If he wants a war, he'll get one. But I'll fight on my terms, with proof, with truth, with law. I went upstairs, tossed my bag down, and opened my laptop. My hands still trembled, but my mind was crystal clear. I started a new folder and named it Evidence. Then I wrote 3 words on a sticky note and slapped it to the side of the screen. Collect, protect, expose. That would be my path forward. I was 32 years old, but in that moment, as I sat staring at the glowing folder named Evidence on my laptop, I felt like I was 13 again, standing small in the living room of our old house, while Daniel basked in applause. The past came rushing back uninvited, each memory carrying the sting of favoritism that had shaped the way we grew up. It was as if my brother's voice memo had torn open a vault of old injustices I had tried for years to bury. When I was 8, I remember working on a poster for the school science fair. I had cut and glued everything neatly researched on my own, practicing my explanation until my throat was sore. But the night before the fair, Dad had gathered us in the living room to show off Daniel's project, a solar system model with perfect planets, the paint still drying. "Look at this," Dad said, his voice full of pride, "a real scientist in the making." Mom clapped softly, smiling. My poster sat in the corner, ignored the glue, drying in silence. At the fair, the next day, Daniel won first place. I got a participation ribbon. At home, no one even asked how it went. Later at 12, I tried out for the middle school choir. When I told Mom I had made the group, she smiled distractedly, then added, "Don't let it interfere with your grades." A week later, Daniel was accepted into a summer math camp, and Mom called 3 aunts to share the news, her voice bubbling with excitement. She didn't even mention my choir. I told myself it didn't matter that I was being sensitive. But those little moments accumulated like pebbles in a jar, filling up with weight I carried silently. Daniel learned early that being the golden child meant never facing consequences. He broke a window once while playing baseball indoors. Mom scolded me for not stopping him. He forgot to feed the dog for 2 days. Mom sighed and told me to take responsibility. When I wanted to go to a high school out of district for its art program, Mom said, "No, it's too far. It's not practical." But when Daniel wanted to attend an Ivy League college 3 states away, the entire family bent over backwards to make it happen. I remember helping Dad load boxes into the car, waving goodbye as they drove him to orientation, then standing on the porch alone, invisible. Even in small daily interactions, the favoritism was sharp. Daniel's plate was always piled higher at dinner while I was told, "Clara, you don't need seconds, watch your figure." If I spoke up about unfairness, Dad would chuckle, "Don't be dramatic." If Daniel raised his voice, it was passion. He grew up believing he deserved more, and I grew up believing I deserved less. By the time I left for college, I had built my identity around not depending on anyone. I worked part-time jobs, stretched every paycheck, graduated with honors in accounting without a safety net. I didn't expect praise, so I didn't feel the sting of its absence. But the wound was still there even if I ignored it. Now sitting in my apartment years later, that old ache fused with the present betrayal. Daniel's words to Mom, "She's unstable, she overspends," weren't random insults. They were sharpened blades forged out of years of conditioning. He knew exactly which stereotypes Mom would believe because they had been whispered into her ear since we were children. He knew Mom had always thought of me as the fragile one, the one who needed guidance, the one who couldn't quite measure up. And he exploited it. The more I thought, the clearer the pattern became. Daniel had always been good at rewriting reality. When we were teenagers and he skipped curfew, he would tell Mom he had been out helping a friend study. When I came home late once after a choir rehearsal, Mom grounded me for a week. When Daniel borrowed money from Dad in college, it was an investment in his future. When I asked for help with rent my first year out, I was told I needed to be independent. And every time Daniel delivered his version of events with calm authority, while I burned with frustration. It was gaslighting before I even knew the word. I realized now that nothing had changed. The voice memo was just the adult version of the same script he had been performing all our lives. Only now the stakes were higher. Mom's house, her savings, her legacy. If he could convince her I was unstable, he could erase me completely from the financial picture. The memories kept pouring. I thought of the Christmas 2 years ago when Mom handed Daniel an envelope with a check inside, whispering it was for his new business venture. I received a sweater that didn't fit the tag, still dangling clearly a re-gift. I smiled anyway, not wanting to sour the holiday. Daniel smirked as he folded the check into his pocket. I told myself not to care. But now replaying it, I saw the truth. He had been preparing the ground-building trust with Mom financially while subtly undermining me. And then there was the night last summer when I tried to talk to Mom about updating her will. I had gently suggested she think about balancing things fairly between us. She looked uncomfortable and said, "Daniel helps me so much. He's reliable." I didn't press, but the words had stung. Reliable. As if I had been nothing but a shadow drifting in and out of her life while Daniel stood tall as the dependable son. All of these memories aligned into one undeniable conclusion: Daniel wasn't improvising. He was executing a long, deliberate campaign to sideline me. And I had just stumbled onto a crucial piece of proof, the voice memo that revealed his tactics in his own voice. I closed my laptop that night, the sticky note still glowing under the desk lamp. Collect, protect, expose. But before I could even start collecting, I needed to understand just how deep his scheme went. The childhood favoritism explained why Mom might believe him, but I needed hard evidence to show she had been manipulated. And for the first time, instead of feeling crushed by the weight of the past, I felt something else: clarity. I had survived growing up in Daniel's shadow. I could survive this too. But this time, I wouldn't just survive, I would fight back. The following weeks unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. Each visit to Mom's house carried with it a heaviness I couldn't shake because Daniel's campaign of whispers and manipulations never stopped, it only escalated. I began to notice details I had overlooked before. His words weren't just casual comments. They were deliberate strokes of paint on a false portrait of me. One afternoon, I arrived to find Daniel already there, lounging at the kitchen table with his laptop open. Mom was stirring soup on the stove. He looked up, flashed his trademark smile, and said, "Clara, did you manage to pay off that credit card finally, or are you still struggling?" He asked it in a tone light enough to pass as teasing, but his eyes were sharp, watching Mom's reaction. My stomach clenched. I had no debt, my finances were meticulously organized, but Daniel said it with such ease that Mom's ladle paused mid-air. "Daniel," I muttered, forcing a laugh. "You know that's not true." He shrugged. "Just worried about you, sis." That was how it always went. A comment here, a suggestion there. Planting seeds. Gaslighting at its most insidious. Later that evening, as we cleared dishes, I heard him whisper to Mom in the living room. "She seems distracted. Don't you think I'm worried she can't handle stress?" Mom murmured something I couldn't catch, her voice low and uncertain. The ache in my chest deepened. I began keeping my phone recording whenever I was in that house. It felt paranoid at first, but every playback proved I wasn't imagining it. There were dozens of moments, Daniel sighing loudly when I misplaced my keys, then muttering, "See, forgetful." Daniel spilling water on the counter, then nudging Mom Clara, so clumsy. Even when I protested, he would laugh it off as a joke, making me appear oversensitive. Classic character assassination disguised as brotherly concern. The cruelest moment came one Sunday afternoon. Mom had invited a neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, over for tea. Daniel was already there, helping her carry in groceries. I arrived with flowers, hoping to brighten the room. As I handed them to Mom, Daniel leaned toward Mrs. Ellis and said in a voice just loud enough, "Clara has such a good heart, but she's always been a bit fragile." Mrs. Ellis gave me a pitying smile, the kind reserved for broken things. I felt my face burn, but Mom said nothing, not one word of defense. That night, I drove home with shaking hands on the wheel. Fragile. That was the story he wanted the world to believe. It wasn't enough to poison Mom's trust, he wanted to tarnish me in the eyes of the community, too. Character assassination by 1,000 cuts. I knew I needed allies. I reached out to my college friend Michael Hayes, who worked in IT security. Over coffee, I confessed everything, the voice memo, the whispers, the deliberate smears. He listened, jaw tight, then said, "Clara, you're not crazy. He's gaslighting you, and you need hard evidence." Michael helped me back up Mom's phone data, retrieving not just the voice memo, but a pattern of similar recordings Daniel had sent. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became this wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was a strategy. Meanwhile, I started noticing paperwork on Mom's desk that looked unfamiliar. Bank forms with Daniel's handwriting, envelopes from the insurance company. One evening, I caught a glimpse of a draft power of attorney document tucked under a stack of mail. My chest seized. He was accelerating. Soon it wouldn't just be whispers, he would hold legal authority. The realization lit a fire under me. I scheduled an appointment with an elder law attorney Laura Benson recommended by a colleague at work. Sitting in her office surrounded by shelves of case files, I laid out everything. Childhood favoritism, the voice memo, the whispers, the staged mistakes. She listened carefully, then leaned forward. "What your brother is doing is classic manipulation. If he gains power of attorney, he can legally control everything. Your mother's accounts, her house, even medical decisions. You need to stop this before it goes too far. Start documenting every single instance, dates, times, witnesses, recordings. Build a timeline. Once we have enough, we can petition the court to demand independent oversight." I left her office with a folder in my bag and a new kind of determination in my chest. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just reacting, I was preparing. Still, the day-to-day assaults didn't let up. Daniel was relentless. He emailed Mom reminders about bills I had supposedly forgotten to pay, even attaching fabricated late notices he had mocked up. Mom showed them to me one evening, her brows knit with worry. "Clara, are you sure you're keeping up with your responsibilities?" My heart dropped. I pulled up my banking app on the spot, showing her my on-time payments. She looked relieved but confused, as if Daniel's version and mine both carried weight. That confusion was his weapon. The turning point of escalation came during a family dinner. Mom had invited a few relatives. Daniel dominated the table, telling stories of helping Mom with her finances, painting himself as the devoted son. Then, with a deliberate pause, he looked at me and said, "We all know Clara has a tendency to get overwhelmed. It's better if I handle the important matters." A hush fell over the table. I stared at him, fury boiling, but before I could speak, he raised his glass in a mock toast. To protecting the family. Laughter trickled nervously around the table, but I saw the pitying eyes of my relatives fall on me. That night, as I replayed the recording I had captured under the table, my anger solidified into resolve. Daniel wasn't just undermining me privately, he was staging a public campaign, laying groundwork for when he finally seized full control. But what he didn't know was that I had been quietly collecting, protecting, and preparing to expose. He believed his performance was flawless. He had no idea his mask was already cracking and I would be the one to rip it off. The next Monday morning, I walked into Laura Benson's office clutching a notebook so full it could barely close. Over the past 2 weeks, I had logged everything dates times direct quotes, even screenshots of Mom's emails that Daniel had tampered with. Laura greeted me warmly, motioned me to sit, and began flipping through the pages. Her expression hardened as she read. "This," she said, finally tapping the entry about the forged late notices, "is evidence of intentional misrepresentation. Keep building. You're on the right track." Hearing those words felt like someone had finally thrown me a rope in deep water. For so long, Daniel had made me feel like the unstable one, the exaggerator. Now, a professional voice confirmed what I knew: I wasn't crazy. He was calculated. Laura laid out the plan: we would gather enough evidence to petition the probate court for an independent accounting of Mom's assets. That would prevent Daniel from slipping papers under her nose and quietly gaining power of attorney. But she warned me, the court won't act on suspicion. We need a pattern: consistent, deliberate actions proving his manipulation. Recordings, documents, witnesses. I nodded, heart pounding with both fear and relief. Finally, a strategy. That evening, I called Michael, my IT-savvy friend, and told him everything Laura had said. He immediately offered to comb through metadata from Mom's phone and email. Within days, he uncovered that several reminder emails had been sent not from utility companies, but from an account Daniel had created using a look-alike address. The level of detail was chilling. He had copied logos, headers, even fake account numbers. Michael's face tightened as he showed me the screen. "He's not just whispering lies, Clara. He's fabricating reality." I forwarded the findings to Laura, who added them to the growing case file. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in a wall I was building between Daniel and Mom's future. But it also intensified my anger. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was fraud. Meanwhile, Daniel's efforts grew bolder. One Friday afternoon, Mom called me sounding anxious. "Daniel says I should sign some papers to make things easier for you both if anything happens to me. He says it's routine." My stomach dropped. I asked her to send me a photo of the documents. When she did, I nearly choked. It was a draft granting Daniel durable power of attorney. His name neatly typed, my name conspicuously absent. I drove to Mom's house that night, my pulse pounding. The papers were on the counter, Daniel sitting smugly at the table with a pen already uncapped. "Clara," he said smoothly, "this is just for Mom's protection. You wouldn't understand the legal details." I forced myself to stay calm, slipping the phone in my pocket to record. "Really?" I asked, picking up the papers. "Because I spoke to an elder law attorney this week. She says this isn't protection, it's control." His eyes flickered just for a second before he plastered on a smile. "Always so dramatic," he sneered. Mom looked between us, confused, torn. I didn't sign. Neither did Mom that night. But the incident rattled me. It proved how close he was to winning. That weekend, I sat with Laura again. She looked me squarely in the eyes. "We need a decisive moment. Evidence is one thing, but to convince your mother in the court, we'll need to show Daniel's actions in front of others. A public confrontation with undeniable proof." The thought made me sick, airing our dirty laundry in front of family and community. But I knew she was right. Daniel thrived in shadows. To stop him, I had to drag him into the light. So I began preparing. Michael helped me compile the recordings into a digital folder, each file labeled with date and context. Laura drafted a formal petition ready to file once we triggered the confrontation. I printed everything: voice memo transcripts, forged emails, copies of financial documents, and bound them in a thick blue binder. I kept it hidden under my bed, but every night I pulled it out, flipped through the pages, and reminded myself this is my weapon. The chance came sooner than expected. Mom's 63rd birthday was approaching. Daniel insisted on hosting a large dinner at her house, inviting relatives, neighbors, even members from her church. "It'll be special," he said, his voice dripping with charm. I knew instantly this was his stage. He would use the celebration to parade himself as the devoted son, the protector, while subtly belittling me. But I saw an opportunity. If I brought the binder, if I confronted him with evidence in front of everyone, his mask would finally crack. The night of the party, I dressed carefully in a navy dress, simple but strong, my hair pinned back. I slipped the binder into a tote bag and rehearsed my words in the car. My stomach twisted with nerves, but beneath the fear burned a steady flame of resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Mom's safety, her dignity, her future. When I arrived, the house was buzzing with chatter, laughter, clinking glasses. Daniel moved through the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, topping up wine glasses, making everyone feel seen. He greeted me with that same too bright smile, his eyes scanning me as if daring me to cause a scene. I smiled back, calm, my tote heavy at my side. Dinner began, the table crowded with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, bowls of salad. Mom sat at the head, cheeks flushed with happiness. Daniel made a toast, his voice carrying through the room. "To Mom, the strongest woman we know. I only hope I can continue protecting her as she deserves." He looked directly at me as he said it, a subtle jab wrapped in praise. A few guests clapped. My jaw tightened. I waited until the plates were cleared, until the hum of conversation softened. Then I stood my chair, scraping against the hardwood. Heads turned. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the blue binder on the table. The thud silenced the room. "Since we're celebrating Mom," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I think it's time everyone here knows the truth." I flipped the binder open, sliding out the first transcript. Daniel's voice filled the room as I played the recording. "Mom, you know Clara is unstable." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mom's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel paled, then flushed crimson. "That's taken out of context," he stammered, but his voice cracked. I pulled out printed emails next, laying them flat on the table. "These late notices fake, sent from an account Daniel created. He's been fabricating evidence to convince Mom I'm unfit." The silence was electric. Relatives leaned forward, whispers rustling. A neighbor shook her head in disgust. Daniel tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "She's making this up, twisting things. You all know Clara." But before he could finish, Michael, who had agreed to attend quietly in the back, stepped forward and said, "I've verified the data. These emails came from Daniel's computer. It's all documented." Daniel's mask shattered. He shouted, knocking over a glass face contorted in rage. Mom looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Her voice trembled. "Daniel, is this true?" He couldn't answer. The silence was louder than any confession. That night, the golden child's shine finally dimmed. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one shrinking in his shadow. The room had gone still like a church after the final hymn, when no one dares to move. My binder lay open on the table, pages splayed with transcripts, forged emails, and highlighted bank forms. The proof was no longer hidden in my laptop or tucked away under my bed. It was right here, illuminated by the chandelier above, exposed to every pair of eyes in the room. Daniel's face shifted in a dozen directions. Anger, disbelief, the faint curl of a smile, as if he could still charm his way out, but none of them stuck. The mask he had worn his whole life was cracking with every passing second. I took a breath, feeling the weight of every eye, and said, "For years, I thought it was just me, that I was imagining the favoritism, the whispers, the dismissals. But this," I tapped the binder with a sharp snap, "this proves it's not in my head. This is who Daniel is when he thinks no one's listening." A murmur swelled around the table. Aunt Linda leaned forward, squinting at the documents. Mrs. Ellis, the neighbor who had once given me that pitying smile, gasped and whispered, "My God." Daniel slammed his palm against the table, rattling the silverware. "This is absurd. Clara's been unstable since she was a teenager. She's always dramatic, always twisting things to make herself look like a victim. You're all falling for her act." But his voice was too sharp, too defensive. The confidence was slipping. I flipped to another page and held it up. This is an email Daniel sent to Mom pretending to be from the water company saying I'd forgotten to pay a bill. Michael traced the source. It came from Daniel's personal laptop. I turned the paper so everyone could see the logo, the fake account number, the metadata printed at the bottom. It's not just whispers. It's fraud. Gasps again, louder this time. Uncle Robert muttered, "That's criminal." Michael, who had stepped closer, now spoke in a calm, steady tone. "I'm an IT security analyst. I verified all of this. Every email, every file, every timestamp. They all lead back to Daniel." The crowd reaction was palpable. People shifted in their chairs, some shaking their heads, others staring at Daniel like they didn't recognize him. Mom clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white, her lips trembling. Daniel pointed a trembling finger at me. "She's orchestrating this. She's jealous. She's always been jealous." That word, jealous, cut deep. I felt a flash of every Christmas, every birthday, every moment I'd been pushed aside. But instead of shrinking, I stood taller. "Jealous," I said, my voice steady. "Of you tricking our mother into handing you her life savings, of you forging documents and lying to her face. No, Daniel, I'm not jealous. I'm done being silent." The silence that followed was thunderous. Then Mom spoke, her voice small but sharp. "Daniel, tell me it isn't true." Daniel faltered, opening his mouth, closing it, searching for words, but the room had already turned against him. Aunt Linda shook her head. Mrs. Ellis muttered, "I can't believe it." I laid one final page on the table, the draft power of attorney, with Daniel's name, typed neatly, mine omitted. This was waiting for Mom to sign. He wanted full control, complete authority, and he almost got it. The weight of the truth hung heavy in the air. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in my life, I saw her look at Daniel not with pride, not with indulgence, but with horror. "How could you?" she whispered. "You're my son." Daniel's facade broke. He shoved his chair back, standing so abruptly it nearly toppled. "You'll regret this, Clara," he spat. His voice cracked, the polished charm gone. He looked around the room, desperate for an ally, but found none. Every face was either disgusted, disappointed, or silent. I didn't flinch. "No, Daniel," I said softly, almost tenderly. "For once you'll face the consequences." He stormed out the front door, slamming so hard the walls rattled. The guests sat in stunned silence, the sound of his exit reverberating long after he was gone. Mom's shoulders slumped as she sank into her chair. Tears spilled freely now. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. I reached across the table, laying my hand over hers. "You don't have to say anything tonight, Mom. Just know that you're not alone. I won't let him hurt you anymore." For several minutes, no one spoke. Then slowly, cautiously, conversation resumed in low murmurs. Some guests began gathering their things, whispering words of support to Mom as they left. Aunt Linda squeezed my shoulder, her eyes fierce. "You did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When the house finally emptied, only Mom, Michael, and I remained in the quiet living room. The binder still sat on the table, its pages spread like scars exposed to the air. Mom stared at it, her expression a mixture of sorrow and dawning clarity. I always believed Daniel was the strong one, the dependable one. And I let him make me doubt you." Her voice broke and the sound sliced through me. But I didn't let the anger spill. I just held her hand tighter. "He knew how to play that role, Mom. He's been playing it all his life. But roles aren't reality. The truth is right here." Michael stood to leave, giving me a nod. "I'll get these files ready for Laura. You'll want them filed with the court immediately." His voice carried quiet certainty, a reminder that this wasn't just a family drama, it was a legal battle now. After he left, Mom and I sat in silence, the only sound the faint tick of the wall clock. Finally, she whispered, "What happens now?" I looked at the binder at the wreckage Daniel had left behind and felt the spark of determination flare into something steadier. "Now," I said, "we make sure he can never do this again." The confrontation had ended, but it wasn't closure. It was ignition. The crowd had seen the truth. Daniel's mask had fallen and Mom's blind trust had cracked. But to truly protect her, I knew I had to move beyond exposure. I had to turn evidence into consequence. As I packed the binder back into my tote, I felt the weight differently than before. It wasn't just proof. It was a weapon, and the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, lying awake in the guest room, I replayed the scene over and over, the gasps, Daniel's rage, Mom's broken whisper. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the forgotten child clapping in the shadows. I felt like the one who had finally dragged the truth into the light. And tomorrow, I promised myself I would walk into Laura's office and put the final nail in Daniel's scheme. The morning after this birthday confrontation, the air in Mom's house felt different. The cinnamon-scented candles from the night before had burned out, leaving only the faint smell of wax and smoke. Mom sat at the kitchen table in her robe, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling beside her. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. She looked older, smaller somehow, as if the weight of what she had seen had settled on her shoulders overnight. I placed the blue binder on the table between us, opening to the page with Daniel's forged emails. "Laura is ready to file the petition today," I said softly. "Once it's in the court system, Daniel won't be able to make a move without oversight." Mom's hand trembled as she reached for the page. "I believed him," she whispered. "All these years, I believed him when he said he was protecting me. And all the while he was—" Her voice cracked. She didn't finish. I squeezed her hand. "He won't get away with it, Mom. Not this time." That afternoon, Laura filed the paperwork, a petition demanding an independent accounting of Mom's assets and an injunction preventing Daniel from accessing or altering any financial accounts until the review was complete. It was a powerful legal blow. Daniel's free reign was over. The bank responded quickly. By the end of the week, Daniel's access to Mom's joint accounts was frozen. Automatic alerts were set to notify both Mom and me if any attempt was made to move funds. I received the email confirmation and felt a wave of relief wash through me. The door he had been prying open was now slammed shut, but the legal victory was only part of the fallout. Word spread fast in our community. The guests who had witnessed the confrontation whispered to others, and soon the story of Daniel's forged emails and voice memo was circulating at church potlucks and neighborhood gatherings. People who had once praised him now eyed him with suspicion. A man who had spent his whole life carefully cultivating the image of the reliable golden son was suddenly exposed as a fraud. At Sunday service, I felt the shift. People approached Mom with sympathy, offering hugs and murmured words of support. Others came to me directly. "Clara, you were brave to speak up. I'm so sorry you went through this. I never trusted how smooth Daniel was." Each comment was both comforting and painful, a reminder of how easily everyone had believed him before. Daniel, of course, didn't take it quietly. He called Mom in a fury, his voice loud enough that I could hear even when she held the phone away. "How could you let her embarrass me like that? Do you know what people are saying about me now? Do you realize what this is doing to my reputation?" Mom's voice shook as she answered, "You did this to yourself, Daniel." She hung up before he could respond. Tears filled her eyes as she set the phone down, but there was steel in her expression. For the first time, she wasn't bending to him. "Laura warned me to be careful. People like your brother don't give up control easily," she said. "He may try to retaliate, but remember now, the law is watching, and so is your community." She was right. Daniel tried to spin the narrative. He told relatives I had faked the documents, that Michael was a biased friend who had tampered with files, but no one believed him. The evidence was too strong, and his rage only made him look guiltier. A week later, we sat in a conference room at the bank with a compliance officer and Mom's financial advisor. Daniel was there, too stiff in his suit, jaw clenched. The officer reviewed the independent accounting petition and laid out the rules. No single decision could be made without joint approval. Clara would serve as trustee alongside Mom, while Daniel's access was restricted. His face reddened with each word. When the meeting ended, he shoved his chair back and stormed out without a glance at me. The consequences kept snowballing. His employer, where he managed mid-level accounts, heard rumors of the forgery. Within a month, he was placed on leave pending an internal investigation. I didn't gloat, but I couldn't ignore the irony. The man who had tried to brand me as unstable was unraveling publicly. At home, Mom began leaning on me more. She asked me to help her review bills, to sit with her as she updated her will. She signed a new document this time with a notary present. Both children would inherit equally, but Clara would act as trustee. As I held the pen steady for her trembling hand, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I should have trusted you all along," she whispered. I swallowed hard, emotions tangling in my chest. What matters is that you do now. Daniel, meanwhile, grew more isolated. Neighbors avoided him. Family members stopped returning his calls. The golden child had become a cautionary tale. One evening, as I closed the binder and slid it back under my bed, I realized the war I had feared was no longer looming. It had already been fought, and I had won. Not with screaming matches or fists, but with truth, evidence, and the law. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. The weeks after the legal battle felt like stepping into a new season of life. The air seemed clearer, my chest lighter, though the scars of betrayal still ached. For the first time since childhood, I no longer felt like I was living in Daniel's shadow. Instead, I was building something of my own, brick by brick, grounded in dignity rather than doubt. Mom began calling me almost daily. Sometimes it was about practical matters, asking me to double-check a bill review, a letter from her insurance company, or explain a tax notice. Other times, it was just to chat, her voice softer, almost tentative, as if she was relearning how to trust me. One evening, while we sat together going over her bank statements, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I don't know if I can ever forgive myself," she whispered, "for believing him all these years, for letting him paint you as less than you are." I swallowed hard. "Mom, you don't need to apologize. He was good at convincing people. He fooled all of us at some point. What matters is that you see the truth now." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "You saved me, Clara. You saved everything." That night, I drove home under a sky sharp with stars, the cool air rushing through my open window. For once, the silence in the car didn't feel oppressive. It felt free. Meanwhile, Daniel's world continued to collapse. The bank's independent accounting revealed minor but undeniable irregularities in how he had handled joint funds. While they didn't rise to the level of criminal charges, they were enough to justify permanently restricting his access. His employer completed their investigation, and word spread quickly he had been terminated. The golden child, once celebrated at every family gathering, was now whispered about as a cautionary example of arrogance and greed. He tried reaching out once more, sending me a long, furious email filled with accusations claiming I had ruined his life, that I had brainwashed Mom, that I had turned the family against him. I read it only once, then archived it. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to respond. His words no longer carried power over me. Instead of feeding the anger, I poured my energy into something new. Inspired by the ordeal, I launched a small charitable fund in Dad's name, aimed at supporting local students in financial need. It wasn't grand, just a modest scholarship to help cover textbooks and supplies, but it was mine. Each time I reviewed an application, I thought of the little girl I used to be, the one whose science fair project was ignored, whose voice was drowned out by Daniel's praise. That girl would never have imagined that one day she would be the one holding the keys, choosing whom to lift up. Moving into my own condo sealed the change. It was a modest 2-bedroom with sunlight spilling through wide windows in the morning and a small balcony where I planted herbs. The day I signed the papers and held the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room listening to the echo of my footsteps. I whispered aloud, "Dignity is not given, it's reclaimed." The words settled into the walls like a vow. At the housewarming a few weeks later, Mom came with a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. As she set them in a vase on my counter, she looked around the condo with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "I'm proud of you, Clara," she said simply. It was such a small sentence, but it landed heavier than all of Daniel's insults combined. For years, I had craved those words, and now finally they came freely, unprompted, genuine. Neighbors and family friends began to treat me differently too. Mrs. Ellis stopped by one Sunday with a tin of cookies and an apology in her eyes. "I shouldn't have believed him," she said softly. "I see you clearly now." I accepted with grace, not bitterness. It wasn't her betrayal I carried, it was his. The final closure came when Mom updated her will, officially this time in the presence of her attorney and a notary, Clara Mitchell, trustee. The title looked surreal on the document, but it was real. I had gone from being erased to being entrusted. When Mom handed me the signed copy, she said, "This isn't about money, it's about trust, and you've earned it 100 times over." I hugged her tightly, tears spilling down my cheeks. As for Daniel, he drifted farther into isolation. Family gatherings no longer revolved around him. At Thanksgiving, he wasn't invited. His name was barely spoken, and when it was accompanied by sighs and shakes of heads. He had tried to frame me as unstable, but in the end, he was the one exposed as reckless, manipulative, and unworthy of trust. One evening, sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea, I thought about the long arc of the journey. From the voice memo that shattered me to the binder of evidence that exposed him to the courtroom petition that secured justice, I had walked through fire and come out whole. The scars remained, yes, but they were proof of survival, not weakness. And I knew this story wasn't just mine. It was for every overlooked daughter, every sibling cast aside by favoritism, every person whose dignity was trampled by someone who thought they could rewrite the truth. My fight had been personal, but the moral was universal. Justice may be slow, but it comes. And dignity once reclaimed cannot be stolen again. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the city lights flickered on, I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the shadow in Daniel's story. I was the author of my own. When I look back now, I realize this story was never just about money or property. It was about trust, dignity, and the painful truth that sometimes the deepest betrayal comes from those closest to us. My brother thought he could erase me with whispers, forge a new reality with lies, and walk away with control. But in the end, his own voice exposed him. Evidence law and persistence turned the tables. And more than anything, I learned that dignity isn't handed down, it's reclaimed through courage and truth. For those of you listening, especially if you're over 50 and know what it feels like to carry the weight of family conflict, I hope my journey shows you this. You are not powerless. Even when you've been overshadowed for years, even when gaslighting makes you question your own memory, the truth still has a way of shining through if you hold on to it and fight for it. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced favoritism or betrayal inside your own family? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me also, where are you watching from tonight? It always amazes me how our stories connect across cities, states, and even countries. And if this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe for more stories of justice and dignity reclaimed, and share it with someone who might need the reminder that the truth always wins in the end.